right off Broadway is the coolest place.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
They
like
got their
3
own place.
floors. Yeah, they got their own place, and every floor has a different theme.
I want to go.
What are the
Let's do
themes?
a road trip to Nashville. Yeah, what are the
The
themes?
bottom theme, with the velvet ropes, was very Saturday Night Fever-ish.
Okay.
The middle
just
theme
go.
seemed very new country, and upstairs seemed relatively, I guess, Y2K on Sirius.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and I think, or prime country. And to me, the middle floor seemed very new country. I'm trying to think the name
where
of
did
it.
you fall? Where did you
I'm
hang
new
out?
country. I'm new to country.
You were in you're
He
middle
was
of
in
the
the
road.
stairwell.
Yeah.
Going between the
But it's also a
genres.
sports bar, too, so you can sit there and hang out.
Oh, there's beer. That's why you went.
All right, we have a top story that we want to tell you about, the battle of the dueling memos.
All right, the House Intelligence Committee voting unanimously to release the Democratic rebuttal. Now it's up to the president whether or not to make it public.
Kevin Cork, live at the White House with breaking details. Good morning to you, Kevin.
Ainsley, Steve, BK, you're right. The president and the press secretary, Sarah Sanders, wants the American people to know something very important. Yes, in fact, the White House has received that memorandum. I have a statement from her this morning, and I think you'll find this one very interesting. It reads, the White House has received a memorandum from the minority members of the House Select Permanent Committee on Intelligence. As stated many times, I love how she adds that because it's true, the administration will follow the same process and procedure with this memorandum from the minority as it did last week when it received the memorandum from the majority. Now, yesterday we saw the president tell a gathering in the great state of Ohio, plain and simple, the memo that Devin Nunes put out proved his political opponents got caught misusing the system to spy on Americans.
Did we catch them in the act or what? You know what I'm talking. Oh, did we catch them in the act? They are very embarrassed. They never thought they were going to get caught. We caught them. Oh, it's so much fun. We're like the great sleuth.
But Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi is also out with a statement. She says, look, the president must now put our national security and intelligence first and expeditiously release the Democratic memo after review and appropriate redaction of sources and methods by law enforcement officials. Bottom line, when's it going to come out? We don't know. But we do know the president has it, and he'll decide whether or not it does. Back to you.
All right, Kevin Cork,
Thanks,
live in the north lawn of the White House. Pretty
sure.
pink sky over the Treasury Department back there.
Once the FBI and DOJ tell him what needs to be redacted for safety reasons, I'm sure he will release it so that America can see both. You can make comparisons and you can make up your own mind.
And the way I understand, there's two things that are going to stand out that Democrats want to make clear. There was a footnote at the bottom saying that the information from the dossier was politically motivated. And Andy McCabe was taken out of context when he said without the dossier, we wouldn't have got the FISA warrant. That's the two.
To watch Carter Page and ultimately spy on all the Trump people. Well, now there's news that it looks like there's a second dossier. And Charles Grassley and Lindsey Graham had written a note to Congress asking about a Steele memo from 2016, which apparently referred to the government got intel from a foreign subsource. Who was the foreign subsource? Apparently, it was Christopher Steele. Here's how it worked. Cody Shearer, who is a longtime friend and ally of Bill Clinton and Hillary Rodham Clinton, had worked with Steele. He gathered more dirt, right? Then he gave it to this fella who is currently working at the State Department, and it looks like he's Nunes' next target. His name is Jonathan Weiner. He got the information, then he passed it on to Steele, and Steele then put it in the memo, which was the second memo was going to back up the first memo if they needed it.
So in layman's terms, or to sum it all up, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton's friends were giving information to Christopher Steele to write the dirty dossier.
Right, and the dossier, that's the one that's 35 pages that BuzzFeed let out. What we just told you is new. And Christopher Steele, we don't know how we acquired this information. We know the bill was about $10 million. But we also don't know if he was getting it from Russian sources. Was he just walking around with a magnifying glass?
It sounds like it was coming from Hillary Clinton's allies. So let's think. So we do know that in the first dossier, a lot of that stuff unverified, right? Essentially made
Most of
up.
it.
What about the second stuff? Think about it. If you are in the midst of a political campaign and you receive a bunch of stuff from Hillary's friends, do you think it's going to make Donald Trump look good? I don't think so.
Well, let's add one other thing. Then you get that information and you meet with friends in the media. And they relay that information to us. And we're doing 20, not necessarily anchors, but everyday people that are doing 20 million things at the same time. You go, wow, look at this. Yahoo, Mother Jones, New York Times, all has the same story. It must be true.
But the thing about the Yahoo story, which was revealed by the memo we got on Friday, was Christopher Steele was fired by the FBI, right? Because he was talking to the press. So he goes and he talks to Michael Isikoff and he tells him this story. Then Michael Isikoff prints it, and then the FISA court uses that story as rationale to spy on Carter Page.
And that's the Yahoo story.
Unbelievable. Well, that first memo, the one that was released on Friday by the president, we just had Judge Andrew Napolitano on set with us, and he had this to say about that memo.
3 words in the Republican memo. The FBI and the DOJ begged Congressman Nunes to remove, and he and the Republican majority chose not to. The references to Chris Steele, the author of the infamous dossier, referred to in the Republican memo as longtime FBI asset.
Seems like the judge was just here seconds ago. So Christopher Steele is all over this. Now you wonder why Senator Grassley and Senator Graham got together and they essentially want to talk to him again. They actually want to bring up criminal charges about Chris Steele for not telling him the truth, among other things.
But ultimately, in the past, we've heard that the Republican investigators have been going after people in the FBI and in the Department of Justice. Now it is clear they are taking on President Obama's State Department to see what role they had in the collection and dissemination of anti-Trump information that ultimately wound up in front of the FISA court.
Headed by John Kerry, who was rumored to have just told the Palestinian leader, don't worry, Trump is going to be out of here in like a year. Well, we're in year 2, so he's already a little bit off. But why would he say that? Although it's been unverified, it seems very specific. So is he in there? Mark Levin on his show yesterday was saying that, look out, this is getting to President Obama.
We also had a guest on earlier who was talking about how the stock market went down yesterday. Wall Street, she said, might have had a down day. But this is great news for Main Street because people are getting more money in their pocketbooks when they look at their paycheck. President Trump went to Ohio yesterday, and he was talking to folks there, and he was in a factory. We interviewed the guy who owns the factory yesterday. He gave out $1,000 bonuses to all of his employees. This is the president talking about the Democrats when he was at that factory yesterday in Ohio.
Believe it or not, Nancy Pelosi and those in Congress who want to raise your taxes, they want to raise your taxes. They don't want to give the money to the military where we need it. You know, without the military, we might not be here, or we might not be here for long, believe us all. Nancy Pelosi, what she's doing to this country, and she's gone so far left, and Schumer's gone so far left. Oh, I look forward to running against them.
He went on to say that that might be the best weapon for us in the midterms, put Nancy Pelosi out there as this could be your speaker. And a lot of people think, including many Democrats, that is not an easy thing to overcome.
Particularly if you take a look at her soundbite archive through the years. Nancy Pelosi, essentially the Republicans would have to just say, do you want this person to be speaker again?
Well, so we always, listen, we always sit on this couch when we talk about her, how she compares certain things, and she just has some really funny sound bites. And so one time, I think it was during a commercial break, it might have been on air, you said we should put all of her sound bites together.
But have we done that?
The best of Nancy Pelosi.
Is there a chance for us to do that?
I think they heard your request, and they did it for you, Brian.
For example?
Listen.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Diversion, subterfuge. Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi.
We have to confer with the Qataris, who have told me over and over again that Hamas is a humanitarian organization.
Ohio State Senator Tina Turner, doesn't she turn it on?
Scapegoat. You know what a scapegoat is? That means in a community where people want to absolve themselves of guilt, they get a goat and they heap all of the ills onto the goat, and then they run the goat out of town.
Healthcare, the debate on healthcare is life-death. This is Armageddon.
Anybody who's familiar with Frankenstein knows that it was a creation, a monster that was created. In terms of the bonus that corporate America received versus the crumbs that they are giving to workers to kind of put the schmooze on is so pathetic.
Right.
Put the
Full
shoes
circle. We end with crumbs, but I'm sure it's not the overall end. There'll be other great phrases.
I think the most damaging thing she said in that whole thing was crumbs.
Crumbs. Crumbs.
Anyway.
That's a look back at what Nancy Pelosi has brought to America.
That's right. Meanwhile, it's 7-Eleven here in New York City on this Tuesday. Still ahead, liberals like Al Franken, Elizabeth Warren, and conservative Ben Shapiro all invited to speak on a college campus. I don't think he's a liberal. But guess which one is getting the runaround by the school? We're going to talk about that.
Plus, the left, in many cases, in full panic mode, in a way gleeful, perhaps, of the stock market drop.
Waves do crash, and it happens from time to time on Wall Street. The White House is finding that out very clearly.
It was the biggest point drop in the history of the stock market.
Edward Varney says the sky is not falling.
Crash. It was more like a market drunken veering into a ditch, and that ditch was icy and it couldn't get out, and it had to call a tow truck.
And erasing a lot of our retirement savings.
The president was right all along. We set a new all-time record. Only it was the biggest point drop in the history of the stock market.
So what happened yesterday was a drunken crash in a ditch or something like that. Stuart Varney, yesterday the market dropped 4.6%, down 1,100, down at one point for 1,600.
Yeah.
It was a bad day.
It was a big sell-off. But let me tell you this right from the get-go. A, the sky is not falling. B, there is no economic catastrophe on the horizon. C, the left is spinning this because they really want to associate President Trump with anything negative. D, did you hear that bit about, oh, your retirement savings have been erased? Nonsense. Your retirement savings are still up about 1/3 since the election of Donald Trump.
So this takes us back to December numbers.
Yes, we've lost the gains of 2018.
Okay, but still better than the
but
last
you've still got all
administration,
the gains of 2017 very much in place. Look, there are two reasons why we've got this big sell-off on our hands. Number one, we were due. The market has gone straight up ever since the election of Donald Trump.
Not natural.
Nothing goes up straight up forever. All markets correct, period. You've gone from 18,000 to 26,000. Okay, so now you've corrected to 24,000. That's what's happened.
Right.
B, the economy is doing extremely well. And when the economy does well, interest rates tend to rise. Rising interest rates are not good news for the stock market, hence this sell-off yesterday. Right. And you'll get more selling at the opening bell today. It's going to be an up and down day. Extreme anxiety today. How it closes, I don't know, but it probably will open lower.
So the fundamentals of the economy are sound.
Yes.
But do you think the president will, from now on, have a different approach to when the stock market goes up again, to maybe not get behind it? Because presidents in the past have stayed away from the market because of its volatility.
I think the president was right to tout the Trump stock market rally because it was his policies which created the Trump stock market rally. I don't think you should say anything about this current sell-off. President shouldn't stick into that kind of sell-off on a day-to-day basis. Right. Steer clear of that, please, Mr. President. But by all means, take credit for the rally that you've seen so far.
Okay, so I was reading in the Wall Street Journal today. It said there was no obvious catalyst. It could have been related to the possibility of inflation. But Stuart, explain this. It also said it could have been machine-driven. You know, they've got all of these algorithms and things like that. When something happens, how do these machines take over at these big Wall Street firms?
Okay, you don't have actual human beings who press a button, buy or sell. You've got a computer-driven program, as you say, the algorithm, which looks at key movements in individual stock prices. It hits a certain price and boom, the algorithm kicks in, you buy, you sell. So it's machine-driven.
The algorithms
That
panicked.
is true. The algorithm panicked. Mid-afternoon yesterday, I was watching the tape, and it went from a -600 to a -1,600 in the space of just a few minutes.
How can that be?
Well, that's the algorithm kicking in.
The machines.
That was a moment of panic. I think you're right to say it was an algorithmic panic, if you like.
You can use it on your show today.
Thank you very much. I shall do
Right.
that.
I just thought there was electronic things that kicked in because we learned something about the market overheating. When's the cutoff when everything shuts down?
Well, there are such things as collars. So if it drops by a certain amount, there's a pause in the trading, and that's...
We need a pause.
Well, do we? Do we really? Why not let the market function? You're going to have a lot of people moving in today bargain hunting.
Absolutely.
Because the stock price of some companies has come so far down, people are saying, that's a bargain. I'm going to buy it.
I saw Ainsley with coupons before. You were looking to make that bargain.
I am a coupon girl. Some people say coupon, some say coupon.
There you go.
I say Bitcoin's a mess.
Okay.
I know.
We're going to be watching
I only
Stuart.
bought a little bit of it.
We're going to be watching Stuart over
All
at
right.
Fox Business starting
Thanks.
in about 2 hours.
Thanks so much.
President Trump giving a shout out to one worker while he was touring a plant handing out those tax cut bonuses in Ohio.
We'll discuss it later.
We will.
Yes.
Camp taking out terrorist fighters. The B-52 bombers also destroying several stolen Afghan National Army vehicles that were in the process of being converted into explosive devices. Also breaking right now, a heartbroken community lining the streets to honor a sheriff's deputy killed in the line of duty. Officer Micah Flick gunned down in Colorado Springs. Two other deputies and a police officer shot by a suspect responding to reports of a stolen vehicle. That suspect also shot and killed. Deputy Flick lives behind a wife and 7-year-old twins. He's remembered as an outstanding detective, passing away on his 11th anniversary as a cop. Flick is the third Colorado officer killed in the last 5 weeks. Ainsley.
Thank you, Jillian. President Trump was in Ohio yesterday. He was touring one of the plants that was giving out those tax cut bonuses before rallying with those lucky employees.
Dina. She joined Sheffer, come on up, Dina, in 2012 as a customer service rep and has climbed her way all the way up to become a manager. Dina's looking at a tax cut of $1,500. And that's on top of her $1,000 that Sheffer's already giving her.
And now, through the magic of television, that's the person Pete Hegseth is checking in with at Holly's Home Cooking in West Carrollton, Ohio. Pete, she just got a bonus.
She sure did get a bonus. She got a bonus for the tax cut in addition to a bonus given by Sheffer Corporation. We're joined by Dina Spalletti this morning, the customer service manager. You were a rep, now you're a manager of that department as well. I have to ask you first off, though, what's it like to get pulled up on stage by the President of the United States?
It was pretty exciting. We didn't know until the night before that we were actually going to go up and speak to the President. We just thought he was going to kind of shout out our names and talk about what that meant to us, but he thought it would be more personal if we came and told from our own mouths what it meant to us and our families.
Nerve-wracking?
So a little bit, honestly. I had a lot of people praying for me, and I really felt peace when I was up there. So
Well, you looked comfortable and you looked peaceful, as you do this morning as well. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
So tell me, what does that, through the tax cut, you're going to get $1,500 back in your paycheck this year. What does that mean to you?
Honestly, like I mentioned, I've got 2 kids that'll be in college this year, so it's just going to make it a little bit easier to afford their tuition bills and have a little extra at the end of the month.
You know, in addition to you, we talked to a few of your fellow employees at Sheffer as well on the plant floor. They had similar things to say. Take a listen.
The tax reform he's doing is helping me. Anytime I can get a little more money in my pocket, and I know our company seems to be doing a lot better as a whole. We're really busy right now, so I mean those are all good things.
That $1,000 bonus that some Democrats have called breadcrumbs, what are you going to spend it on?
Bills. Getting caught up. Well, starting the year off ahead rather than behind for once.
So, Dina, it's a double whammy. What they were talking about is not just the tax savings that'll come in your paycheck, but also the voluntary $1,000 Trump bonus that your CEO gave out. But some Democrats have described that as breadcrumbs. What do you say to that idea that $1,000 doesn't matter?
Well, Miami University would not have taken breadcrumbs from me if I used that to pay my daughter's tuition. I can tell you that. So it made a difference when her tuition bill was due.
But where does that mentality come from? This idea that, you know, that kind of tax saving or that kind of bonus given out through generosity is insignificant.
I just think that people who live in a different income level just don't realize what it is for the average American worker. That does make a big difference. We heard a lot of stories from our employees of that just being very timely, and it made a real big difference to a lot of people,
Your
myself
CEO,
included.
Jeff Norris, has said he's never received the kind of feedback he got from that bonus. The board approved it.
Right.
But the left will say the CEOs are going to hoard all this money to themselves. What do you say to the idea that actually people are a lot more generous than you think?
You know, I think we just need to look for the good in people and feature people like Jeff Norris who are willing to give back and show that they're not the exception.
Absolutely. Well, Dina, because you got $1,000, you're paying for breakfast for everybody. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Well, they're really excited, and everyone's ordering a lot of extra food. Dina, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. It was a fun day yesterday.
My pleasure. It
Great
sure
to see
was.
you then and this
Thank
morning.
you. Thank
Folks,
you.
back to you. Hope you're spending your breadcrumbs wisely this morning.
Exactly right. All right. Pete and Dina.
I love hearing those stories. Tell her congratulations, Pete.
No kidding. She's now a local celebrity.
All right, 1 minute before the bottom of the hour. Chilling new threat from ISIS targeting airlines. The urgent warning from the Homeland Security chairman next.
And first, his country made its national anthem gender neutral. Now, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has a new target in his PC crusade. Listen to this.
The love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to
we would like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because it's more inclusive.
There we go, exactly.
University of Toronto professor Jordan Peterson got the #1 book out there right now. He's here to react to that. And by the way, he's a Canadian. Right back. Tune here in New York.
Look at that shot. That is our city.
Empire
So
State
cool that we
Building,
live here.
34th Street.
Love that shot.
Right, great. That's New York City. It's a beacon of freedom around the world, perhaps, freedom to walk into the Empire State Building. And let's talk a little bit about Canada with Canada's own Jordan B. Peterson. He's the author of this book. It is called 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. When the book came out, it's now #1 on Amazon. He was on our couch, but we wanted Dr. Peterson to join us today. First off, Dr. Peterson, you put together this book after hearing from the people that talked to you after attending your lectures, right?
Yes, well, and before that as well. I've been writing it for about 5 years.
So the whole idea of 12 Rules for Life is what?
Well, people need guidelines in their life, and what I've done is to try to write a sequence of rules that are witty and sometimes obvious as well, I suppose, but to try to go deep down inside of them and to find out why it is that we need principles to live by, and also to point out that we do in fact need principles to live by to guide us towards a meaningful and productive life, and one that helps us deal with the tragedy and malevolence of existence.
Well, we'll all have to go pick that book up. Congratulations on it, making it to #1. You've been on our show quite a few times, and you are just so smart. So I think your advice is something that other people need to pick up and read through the pages. Thank you so much for also weighing in on some other topics affecting your area, Canada. You're in Toronto right now, and Justin Trudeau, he interrupts a woman at a town hall. She's asking him a question, and he didn't like one of the words that she used. Listen to this soundbite, and then we'll get your reaction.
All right.
So that's why we came here today to ask you to also look into the policies that religious charitable organizations have in our legislation so that it can also be changed, because maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look
we would like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because it's more inclusive.
There we go, exactly.
And the crowd roars.
Yeah. Well, it's quite the performance. I mean, I'm afraid that our Prime Minister is only capable of running his ideas on a few very narrow ideological tracks. We saw the first evidence of that when he put his cabinet together. He insisted upon making it 50% women, despite the fact that only about 22% of the elected MPs were women. And it was easier for him to do that than it was for him to screen people for the sort of competence that would actually be necessary to be cabinet members. So we've seen a fair bit of this behavior, but that was the most egregious example, I suppose.
Dr. Peterson, I recall you taking some heat because you said you would refuse to use these gender-neutral pronouns. Why was that?
Well, I actually said that I would refuse to use the pronouns that were mandated by law. Because they were mandated by law, I feel that it's completely inappropriate of the government to decide what language the citizenry should speak. There's never been an example of that in British common law history, and I believe that that was a very, very bad precedent. I didn't want to use language that I thought was generated by radical leftist propagandists, and so I said I wouldn't do it.
I saw one tweet this morning that said Neil Armstrong should have said one small step for people kind.
Yeah, well, you know, Trudeau was listening to an earnest woman try to discuss something important, and he interjected a ideological statement in the middle of the dialogue, and that indicates, I think, precisely the way he thinks. And I don't think he does think. I think he runs an ideology in his head and accepts the output without question. And I think we're really going to pay for it in Canada in ways that we can't yet imagine.
Well, we're going to find out because you believe it's coming to us here in America, and you've been to both countries frequently. Now let's talk about something else that builds on your premise. This whole father-daughter dance that are being canceled around the country because of gender guidelines. Even Donald Trump Jr. weighed in with this quote: "The father-daughter dances inherently leave people out, not just because of transgender status, just life in general. These can be really uncomfortable, triggering events." That according to Jared Fox, New York City Department of Education. So that's their response to cancel the dance because there's a lot of people that can't go. Is there a problem with that?
Well, the problem with that is self-evident, but it's part of this absolute onslaught by the radical leftists on the fundamental normative structures of our culture. And if you're going to cancel everything that's triggering to everyone, then you're going to cancel everything altogether, because there isn't a single thing that anyone can ever say or do that isn't going to offend someone. And the idea that this is being done so that certain people's feelings won't be hurt, I think, is absolutely absurd. It's not compassion and care that's driving this. It's the desire to put forward a very pernicious ideology. And it's being very, very successful in its application.
But Dr. Peterson, they say that they're doing that to make things more inclusive.
Yeah, well, they say all sorts of things, and they are a very small, noisy, dangerous minority. And it's really appalling that we're bending over backwards to do their bidding without question, under the name of compassion.
A lot of my friends have been posting pictures of the daddy-daughter dance recently, and I think the pictures are so cute. Are little girls going to miss out on a memory?
Well, yes, for sure. And the thing is that even your terminology, when you're talking about little girls, is something that's going to be increasingly forbidden as we demolish the classic gender ideas. And no one's going to benefit from that.
And people
it's going to be a real catastrophe.
I mean, people are even talking about deciding on what gender they want to be as youngsters.
Yeah, well, that's happening all over. It's an absolute epidemic, and we've decided that children as young as 3 or 4 can now decide what gender they are and then undergo the appropriate surgical and biological alterations to bring their morphology in keeping with that. And it's a mistake of epic proportions, and we're going to pay for it in a big way.
We do hear of that, but how often does that happen?
It happens increasingly. Like in Britain in 2015, there were, I think, 57 kids in the gender dysphoria clinics, and last year there were 2,000.
All right. He's got a great book out there, great number-wise right now. #1 in Amazon. It's called 12 Rules for Life. Dr. Jordan Peterson, thank you very much for joining us today from Canada.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for the invitation.
Yeah, and thanks for wearing the gel. Looks good.
There you go.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Peterson. All right, we're going to make it weird here. Jillian, take over with some...
where no one knows what to say to Brian.
Right.
So
Oh, my gosh.
Good morning to you guys. I used to love the father-daughter dances. I went for years.
I know, it's so fun.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Anyway, I'm too old for that, though, besides that. Let's talk about this. The threat of ISIS bombing a passenger plane packed with Americans, well, that threat is very real. House Homeland Security Committee Chairman Congressman Michael McCaul issuing the alarming warning calling for immediate action to shore up security at airports.
Most disturbing and quite frankly, kind of what keeps you up at night, question the crown jewels aviation, and they're still seeking to blow up airplanes even though they may not be able to hijack it. That threat is very real.
Congressman McCaul says the U.S. must deploy more next-generation airport security scanners, but can't because they're caught up in bureaucratic red tape. Democrats Elizabeth Warren and Al Franken both spoke there, but the University of Minnesota is allegedly trying to silence conservative Speaker Ben Shapiro. According to a spokesperson from the Young America's Foundation, the school claimed there was a scheduling conflict despite no other requests made for the same time. Instead,